Greetings and a very warm welcome to you all. Thank you very much indeed for joining Global Peace Studies for Sustainable Development, where we discuss pertinent issues of peace and sustainability from around the world and across Africa. I'm George Mutalemwa, moderating this session on behalf of Solidarity for Peace and Development, or in Swahili, Mshikamano wa Amani na Maendeleo Mama. Our theme today is a shrinking bipolar sphere of influence, global scramble for resources, and its impact on emerging proxy wars. The speaker is Assah Mwambene, who is president of the Public Relations Society of Tanzania and East Africa Public Relations Association. He has also served as head of government communication and director of information and chief government spokesperson for Tanzania. Nice having you again to speak to us, Assah, and thank you for your generosity. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Assah Mwambene.
Remarks. I hope everybody can hear me.
Yes.
Can you all hear me? Okay. Yes, as Dr. Mutalemwa just noted, my presentation is about shrinking bipolar sphere of influence, global power scramble for resources and their impact on the proxy war. I hope you could display the first slide, which starts with introduction. So, in presenting this this topic, I wish to begin by looking at the historical background of the global superpowers in history. We must have noted that globally, the superpowers that have had a lot of influence globally, it includes the Roman Empire, the Great Britain Empire or British Empire, and then immediately after the Second World War, the Second World War, after 1945, we visibly started seeing the great tension between the emerging Soviet Union and polar powers that one represent the Western countries, the US and the Soviet Union, which was quite a collection of a number of countries that formed the Soviet Union. But in the late 1980s to early 1990s, we saw the diminishing role and influence of the Soviet Union, with a lot of countries that were aligned to the Soviet Union started disintegration to the extent that almost the US became the main unipolar kind of a powerful state with a lot of influence globally. It is also important to understand that between the bipolar sphere of influence that involves the US versus the Soviet Union, then historically countries that were aligned to the Soviet Union, so the rest of the countries, of course, even the USA, these are two countries that emerged out of the disintegration of the Roman Empire, the Great Britain. So it gave ways to the birth of the two main countries that were the US and the Soviet Union. So from the late 70s to the 60s to early 90s, the two major powers, the US and the Soviet Union, had commanded quite a lot of influence globally in the global politics. And what happened to countries like Asia, Africa, and Latin America were either defined by being aligned to either of the two. So you would either be associated with the Russia or with the United States. Of course, there were a period where the advent of the non-aligned movement countries, which currently commands about 132 countries at the moment, but by then in the 90s, we were talking about 77 countries globally. It also partly provided a pathway that was neither linked to the US or to the Russian Federation. But of course, later, after the late 2000, from the late 90s to 2000 and beyond, we started seeing the bouncing back of the Soviet Union, to the extent that, the Russia, not necessarily with alliances to the countries that were party to in the past, but coming up strongly with a very strong economy, but also commanding a lot of influence also globally. And again, this influence is not influenced by any colonial history. It was a history defined by the support that Russia provided to many, many countries, especially from Latin America, Africa, and Asia in terms of support, some during the decolonization processes, and while others, it was per se, business per se, or business opportunity that ensured among these countries. So with the US and Soviet Union standing as the bipolar, their role in the recent recently, we have been seeing the advent of the BRICS. The BRICS, which essentially is involves countries like Brazil, Russia, India, China, and I'm forgetting the other and South Africa. So the coming of the BRICS has also seen the rise of countries like especially China and India, with with China being almost being defined to be an ally, a very strong ally of the Russia, alliance with Russia, but doing a lot of business with Russia. And at some point, it has been very difficult possibly to label India in terms of global power, whether they are aligned to the Americans or they are aligned to the Russians. But all along, India has been very free to mingle with the countries like Russia, China, but at the same time, and United States. But the other aspect that has also has partly contributed to erosion of or shrinking of the influence of the bipolar, meaning of the two major powers, the Russians and the Americans, is something called matrilinearism versus bilateralism. If you look at the foreign policies of many major countries in the world, one of the aspects that is enshrined first in their foreign policy is safeguarding national interest
and Assah, sorry that we are getting really a problem hearing what you are saying. Please stay close to your microphone. And if you hear me, Assah. Oh, now I don't hear anything. Sorry. Or is it just me?
Hello, hello,
Yes,
hello.
please go. Yes, now we hear you. Could you repeat what you said
Should I
about a
go on?
minute ago?
Okay. So, okay, okay, fine. So I'm just to do a repeat of what I said 2 minutes ago. So I was first I was talking about the essence of the bipolar, that is the United States and the Soviet Union, which actually existed, especially in the late 60s to the early 1990s. And, when the Soviet Union shrank, in the sense that it gave basically the same languages, but in terms of influence, it shrinked. So it left the US as well.
I think we've lost the connection.
I'm afraid so, yes.
I think in his office there's two machines, and the one that you can see doesn't have a video and may not have an audio connection. Usually the machinery logs you back in
So
if you
myself
get done.
being out of the now.
Here we
Hello?
go.
And again, we lost you for another
Yes,
1
okay.
minute.
So yeah. I just noted now. I'm repeating as I said where I left. Okay. Can you all hear me now?
Yes, we hear you.
So I was explaining the essence of the bipolar, meaning that between the after 1945, we started noting that especially the late 1970s to the late 1990s, when the sphere of influence of the Russian Federation started dwindling, and it gave birth to almost a unipolar superpower of the US, becoming the most influential state in the global politics. And we also started that in the early 20s, we started also seeing the rise of the Russian Federation. Of course, now not with the Union of the Soviet countries, but with the Russia as a country coming up very strongly, of course, with the support from many other former allies that were party to the rise of the Russian Federation. So the late 20s is now seeing 2020s is now seeing the growth of both the bipolar, meaning the US being one of the superpowers, but also the Russian becoming a superpowers. But in the recent past, we are witnessing unfolding where the influence of the two superpowers dwindling to the extent that it is giving birth to something possibly we may not even have a name. If you want to call it multipolar, you will possibly you might be wrong as well, because the advent also of multilateralism, the non-state actors, they changed the mode of the global international relations, because from the past, the international relations was defined by the key players being the national state, nationalism. So most of the foreign policies were aligned to sovereignty, protecting national interests, and most of the foreign policies were aligned in those lines, that the only mode of international relations was more pegged on how the countries were collaborating. So relations was more on countries to a country, so bilaterals we may call. But again, with the advent of the major non-state actors like the World Bank, the United Nations, the EU, the growth of the regional international organizations like SADC, African Union, they sort of assumed some of the powers of the national states that now started defining the international relation in the aspect of the multilateral. So you would find, for instance, major debate at international level now is reducing the power of the national countries to define their own sovereignty or territorial integrity, because some of the roles that were being manned or were partly organized by states are now being run by the non-state actors, institutions. And sometimes these institutions, they develop powers or policies that have a lot of influence on countries. For instance, if you look at the World Bank is not a country, but sometimes they have financial policies that have effect on the national sovereignty to the extent that a country as an individual cannot do anything in terms of deciding. Sometimes when they decide to ignore the World Bank instruction or the World Bank directive, it's like they cut off themselves from the international financial systems, and in so doing, you find that the role of individual countries is also dwindling with the multilateralism system being into places. And so you have countries like regional groups or regional blocks like SADC. Sometimes they have arrangement that provides concessions, for instance, for like visa arrangement. And if you look at the national setup, visa is one of the restrictions that help to safeguard the protection of the security of the country through, administering the visa to somebody that at least you have seen. And so you have these institutions having a visa-free kind of an arrangement, which also dwindles or takes away the powers of national states or sovereignty to the regional blocks or to the international organization or to the non-state actors like World Bank, UN, and European Union. So this is also complicated in terms of the decision-making of individual international countries or global powers also to decide on their own, because many other aspects are that are partly being decided by these non-state institutions. And sometimes when they define some of the democratic principles and rule of law internationally, some of the conditions that are put are those conditions that want you to embrace these principles that are not in any way attached to individual countries. And of course, the fourth industrial revolutions has transcended the world into an aspect that they consume so much. There's a lot of demands for minerals, especially rare earth metals, gas, oil, and this has partly made a lot of demands currently for these rare earth metals and these natural resources to be in high demand. And the high demand has also transcended the world looking at the resources as the determinant of the survival of most of the global powers. The more you have these resources, the more you are likely to command the international respect and command the international politics. For a long time, scholars who have studied the American foreign policy have always said that the American foreign policy was defined by military exercises abroad. So if you look at historically from the American involvement in the Vietnam War, American involvement in the Malaya, American involvement in Lebanon, for instance, 1979, American involvement with the Egyptian, Kuwait, Iraq, All of these were partly the arms that helped America possibly to exercise its foreign policy. But if you look at the moment, although currently America in I wish agenda or the foreign policy of the Americans from the past. And maybe I'll explain this later in the next slide. Can I go to the next slide? So I've already explained the role the current non-state actors have a big role in terms of regulating the international politics. And we are seeing the role, shrinking of the role of the bilateral relations among countries. I've also explained the aspect to advent of the BRICS countries, that is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. In a way, it has brought up the segmentation of the power at global level. It is no longer, although some of the countries that are being are part of the BRICS are historically connected also to the previous relations that existed between Russia and these countries. And therefore, it is transcending global politics to be in a very elusive way, to define, because the Russia is no longer like 100% the adversaries of the US. But if you look at in a sort of alliance, you can see the alliance of the BRICS. South Africa tilting even the current movement of the BRICS, and they are even discussing very strongly in terms of coming up with the single currency. And some of the countries within the BRICS have at times opted to dump using the US dollar to some other currencies. And this also partly came up to complicate the movement of power at global level. Next slide, please. So we are seeing now very like the Russia being closer to China and Iran, and you're also seeing NATO, US, and Israel, forming, they deal with international politics and the issues of power. So the current global scramble for oil and their earth metals, I want to align them in like 4 or 5 scenarios. So when we talk about the Persian Gulf scenario,
Seem to have lost sound again. Oops, I think we lost connection.
Now, I was out for like some seconds. So if you look at the current
Yes, you're muted right now.
Hello?
You are muted, Assah. If you could unmute your microphone, please.
I'm just waiting for Tamtolema to. Okay. Can you hear now?
Yeah, we hear you.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay, fine. So I ended up at I was in the current global scramble for oil and rare earth metals. So I was touching an aspect of the Persian Gulf. So when you look at the Persian Gulf scenario, I'm not talking about Iran as it is at the moment, but the Persian Gulf scramble actually started with the American ambition, the American and the Israel ambition to have access to to Iran as their main adversary. So they started with Syria, where for a long time they were protracted in the war that brought in the Turkish on the sides of Turkish, because they were involved in the Syrian war because of the involvement of the Kurds. Kurds are the originally people from South Turkey, in Turkey, but most of them survived a lot in Germany. But their involvement means that the Turkish involvement in the war in Syria was partly to safeguard their interests because of the Kurds' involvement in the Syrian war. But again, the main aim of the Americans was, in order to get deep and be consistent in terms of attacking Iran, they had to have a very clear path from Lebanon to Syria. So that's why it started the war with Syria. And when I'm talking about that Persian Gulf, I'm talking about the whole area that involves countries like Iran, Israel, Lebanon, Kuwait, Bahrain. So all these countries are the countries that, by estimation, they are almost, their contribution in terms of production oil globally is almost producing the half of the oil produced in the whole world. And this is the major scramble for the powers, those that are aligned to the Eastern Bloc, in the Russian bloc, but which now is, I'm afraid not to mention Russia, but to mention countries, because the role has gone beyond the countries or beyond the bilaterals, I mean, bipolar states of Russia and US. So we are now seeing that Russia, India, partly or halfway India, but countries like Pakistan, China, and of course, these Iranians themselves, they were partly involved in support of the Russians also in Syria. So if I'm to conclude on the aspect of Syria, is that the American interest in the Syrian war, I want to say, almost failed, because the toppling al-Assad in Syria did not mean the victory for the US, because Syria still has first-class bilateral relations with Russia at the moment, and they still have existing arrangement and agreement with Russia. So they still align to the Russians, although recently you might have seen them making a tour to in Germany. So after the Syria, the second culprit was Iran and Lebanon. And of course, the attack on Syria meant that it was an attack on Iran, and it was also an attack on Lebanon. So yes, you would say that Lebanon, or the Hezbollah, who are major operative in Palestine and Lebanon, they sort of triggered this war in the start, but the major culprit was that there were a lot of movement and preparation by the US alliance with Israel to attack. They have a long ambition to attack Iran. Others might be talking about the Epstein case, that this war came up as a cover so that the US president should be exonerated from, directly dealing with the truth about the Epstein case in the US, which they are saying the Israeli intelligence had a hand in terms of fixing any possible future leader of the US by exposing them to a scandal that would make them elusive or not be able to vie even for presidency in future. So after the Persian Gulf, if you look at some of the fighting going on in Africa, for instance, especially in the area of in Sudan. In Sudan, we have South Sudan and Sudan. Within Sudan, we are also having two major problems. One is the Darfur, which has nothing to do with the aspect of the power struggle between the superpowers who are fighting, each supporting each side. So in the case of Sudan, we are seeing presence of the US and Russians well established there, with the former director of defense, former director of intelligence ruling one side, and the former CDF also organizing the other side, and each is supported by each superpower. The US on the side of the former director of intelligence, and the former CDF of the Sudan being on the side of the Russians. So this partly is because if you look at Sudan, it's one of the oil-rich country, and I don't want to mention the aspect of Libya, which is already a country which is in shambles, although it's one of the major oil producers in Africa. But for history tells us how American, killed Muammar Gaddafi. Who had actually stabilized that country for some years. So if you look at the fighting that is going on in Africa, especially in that area of Sudan and South Sudan, it has a hand from the scenarios of these superpowers. And you might have also seen that in the recent, like last month, the US and Israel recognized the Somaliland. And recognizing Somaliland means also that Americans have had a lot of interest to Somalia. And I want to say that was another defeat of the Americans during the Siad Barre leadership some like 30 years ago. And we are seeing also that Somalia now is becoming into the spotlight. And you might also know that there's a tension currently going between Kenya and Somalia over the border, and because of the possibility that one of the islands within in the border has some potential for oil. But look at also the ongoing fightings in the African Great Lakes region. So if you look at the African Great Lakes region, we are talking about a very destabilized Eastern Congo, which key major players is Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, and all these countries have a muscle and they are aligned to either one of the superpowers. So disintegration of the DRC partly has a lot of potential for these rare earth metals. It also have potential for oil, and the area which is more endowed with these resources in Eastern Congo is up for grabs by these superpowers in many ways. So some have established proxies. As we speak at the moment, the ramification of the M23 or M23 movement has gone beyond the name of M23 or M23. They are now, they have co-opted quite a number of key players just because in the last 10, 15 years, M23 was just a group of less than 500 soldiers who opted against the Sun City Agreement, an agreement that spelled out a very key solution for the standoff in Eastern Congo. But currently, the movement has gone beyond that group, and they are now talking actually about the regime change in Eastern Congo, with a lot of involvement of some of the neighbors like Uganda and Rwanda. But we are also seeing it's a new wave of mercenaries coming up and sponsored terrorist groups like Al Qaeda, being positioned to areas that are plumed to all these resources. If you go to Nigeria, for instance, you find an aspect of Boko Haram being in the northern Nigeria that is destabilizing that country. And Nigeria is one of the richest countries in the world with oil. But currently, as we speak, we have many countries now under the AU umbrella. They are in Mozambique. Mozambique is an area which has discovered gas, and there are many major powers and companies, oil companies, that are investing in Mozambique. But currently, the situation is also very volatile in terms of security. And all these are connected partly to the key global players because of the interest that they have. And the fight that you're seeing, it was almost engulfing part of the South Tanzania and the northern part of the of Mozambique. Another slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please, Dr. Mtanemo.
Sorry that I'm struggling to share this, but I hope I will manage. Sorry.
It's okay, but I can continue as okay. So I can still continue as you grapple with that. So so if you now look at the aspect of Venezuela, which is another oil-rich country, almost both the Americans, the Russians had invested heavily, and Chinese, of course, they had invested quite heavily in that area. And of course, part of the countries that were aligned to the Russian Federation, like Cuba, were also partly benefiting from the oil from Venezuela. But it appears that the American involvement in the recent American involvement in the Venezuela was partly to cripple the world, especially Russia, China, from accessing the oil from Venezuela in return for when they come to invade Iran, they shouldn't have the means for oil. And it appears they have successfully managed that, although there are still tension, and I would be surprised if the future of Venezuela still is limbos into a very big future problem because of the current tension that still exists, although they may have successfully managed to bring back to have the former president of Venezuela active in the US, but still always not well within Venezuela itself. Americans do not have 100% ownership and ownership of Venezuela currently.
Assah, sorry, Assah, that your voice again, your sound is not coming out strongly as before.
You hear well now?
Yes, like that.
Okay.
Please.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the second aspect is okay. So look at the possibility, for instance, that exists currently on the Persian Gulf is a division between these powers now. Iraq, Kuwait, UAE, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Lebanon, and of course Israel involvement there. But it's also envisaged that North Korea and South Korea have had a lot of tension, and won't be a surprise if anything happens between these countries. And if you look at the formation of these countries, you will find that North Korea is 100% a proxy for Russia, and South Korea is a proxy for Americans. And it's the same to Venezuela, Cuba versus the US. There's also an aspect of Taiwan and China. There's a lot of tension that has been really existing. And at some point, Taiwan has had a very close connection to Malawi in Africa. And it appears at some point when Taiwan was arming Malawi, tension rivalry between Tanzania and Malawi. I will touch at this aspect also later on the aspect of Malawi in relation to another historical fact that also signifies the powers, the global powers with the Tanzania-Malawi border dispute in Lake Nyasa. If you go to India and Pakistan, there's a kind of an island called Jammu and Kashmir. So Jammu and Kashmir issue between India and Pakistan has been very thorny and very unfortunate that within the countries that are very close to Pakistan, like Afghanistan, for instance, have had infiltration to India and partly was undermining the security of the Indian subcontinent. But if you look also at the manner or the type of tension that exists between them and Pakistan, is that India want to assure the global world that the Muslim world, it is the second largest Muslim country after Indonesia. And while others in Pakistan have used the religion, Islam, as belong to the Pakistan country. When the British left, they had installed sort of an island in between, and which became a problem when the British left in the long run. So this also signifies that there could be future tension and future conflict between these two countries. Now, Tanzania and Malawi over Lake Nyasa. The British, this is it's a bit of a historical fact that in 1890, the colonial government of the British and the German signed an agreement which later came to be known as the Anglo-German Heligoland Treaty of 1890. This treaty was basically spread by the demand by the British by then. The British were in Kenya. Kenya was the colony of the British, and Tanzania was under the German, and Malawi was under the British. Sorry, I said Kenya. Now, because most of the colonies in Africa, the British had wanted access to waters from Lake Jipe, which is in the east-north of Tanzania, and Lake Chala. They also wanted an access to the Lake Victoria waters. So these fights, and so at some point they had to fight between the German and the British. And when this happened, the British wanted an island called Heligo in the North Sea, which was very closer to the German, and the German wanted it for strategic interest. So they had to swap a gift to the German gave a gift to the British in Malawi or Nyasaland government by then, so that they can get all these access that they wanted, especially even changing the border between Kenya and Tanzania, so that the British could get some access to the Lake Victoria waters, but again, Lake Chala and I just mentioned earlier. Now, after the signing in 1890, the Article 1 of the Anglo-German Heligoland Treaty speak very clearly that the Malawi or Nyasaland government has been given the whole lake as theirs. But Article 6 of the same treaty also talks about the aspect of ascertaining the borders, because when they were signing this document, nobody had a picture on the ground, and they used the mountains and rivers to describe the border between the two countries. And of course, the British managed to get what they wanted because the border between Kenya and Tanzania had to be rectified. And so the Lake Chala and Lake Jipe, all of them had the border had to be in the middle. Previously, Tanzania owned all these lakes. And also the same treaty also managed the Mara River, Mara region in Tanzania, which in the past would have been in the part of Kenya. But with this rectification of this treaty, it afforded this region to be part of Tanzania, and it afforded Kenya or the British to have access to the Lake Victoria. But while they have a lot of rectification of the borders from 1890, especially 1906, there were rectification of the border in Lake Tanganyika to put the border to be at the middle. And there were also River Songwe, which divide Tanzania and Malawi. Very unfortunately, that when they finished in 1914, this First World War was in, and therefore the completion of the putting borders was sort of stopped. And in 1919, the German lost, and Tanzania became the British colony, the British protectorate under the League of Nations. Now, why am I also emphasizing on this aspect of the conflict? Is that the aspect that brought us to a tension currently that existed, especially in the recent past, between us and Malawi, was more on the Malawi government giving rights of exploration of the oil in Lake Nyasa by a British company called Stream. So the Malawi government provided a concession to a company in Stream in Britain to do exploration of oil and gas in the lake. And this triggered a lot of tension among us, and it brought us to a negotiation. And until now, we are in the negotiation. But the point I'm trying to put across is that this also, ignites kind of a future problems if it is not well settled. We are now being mediated by the former Mozambican president Joaquim Chissano, who is by then, when he was appointed, he was the leader of the SADC caucus of the eminent personality. So another slide, please. I'm going to the conclusion. Yes, I'm just going to conclude. Another slide, please.
Yes, please.
Okay. Now, what is the impact of these? What is the impact of these tensions among the what I don't want to call them the bipolar system now? It's a system that have been really segmented. The impact is that most of the countries now which are fighting actually are fighting in the interest of the superpowers. The second aspect is that this kind of arrangement is also providing a possibility for mercenaries and undemocratic leadership likely to assume powers within some of these countries, and especially in the interest of the superpowers. And in this case, superpowers that I'm referring to is the divided segmented powers, not now 100% owned by the Russian and the British and the Americans. But we are also seeing, yes, yeah, there. Oh, the other one, the next one, yeah, this one. So we're also seeing this is currently we are also seeing a manifestation of the entrenching of democratic principles and rule of law. What happened, for instance, for Venezuela is beyond international law. It's beyond beyond democratic principles to unseat a sitting president of a country and still be able to override the resources. And I'm glad that the United States president has been very explicitly, very clear that they were doing it so that they can have a share of oil. And the only mistake that Venezuela possibly did was to start having a possibility of selling the oil using the using the Chinese currency. They're also likely to see that countries that are endowed with these rare earth resources are likely to be more engulfed into conflict, or what now people call the resource curse. In conclusion, next. So in conclusion, I just want to say that the world has reached at a very critical point where resources demand overrides processes of natural justice, rule of law, and entrenching democratic principles. And the current scramble for resources is most likely to exonerate impunity and make most powerful nations militarily richer, and the most endowed states with resources might get more impoverished. Ukraine and Russia has also taught us something. A lesson that
Assah, again, if you could come closer to your microphone, we are missing your voice. Oh, sorry. And now we don't hear you.
What about here?
Yes.
Okay. So I was saying that the world has reached a very critical moment when demand for these rare earth metals, oil and gas, is almost overriding all the other democratic principles and rule of law. And the chances are that if this situation is to persist, then we are likely to, it is likely to make most of the countries that, they are likely now to exonerate impunity among states that are really violating international law, and making also most of the countries that are militarily richer or strong to have a lot of powers over these countries that have resources, and they are at the expense of impoverishing these countries with these resources. And I was also touching an aspect of the Ukraine, which Ukraine and Russia, which partly has shown the world that the whole NATO, which we perceived to be one strong entity plus the US, that they were grappling with the Russian Federation currently. And if you look at the manifestation of events, you would conclude that Russia is winning the Ukraine war against NATO and against the US. And it is the same scenario that we are also seeing in the current fighting between the one side, Iran, of course, Iran with their allies, the China, Russia, and of course, neighboring countries like Iraq and Pakistan, also running one side, and the American, the Israel also on the other side. Even if Israel is to win this war against Iran, still globally it will be understood that Iran had won the war, just as we still perceive that in 1971, 72, the Americans lost in South Kong, in Vietnam. And therefore, if you rate Iran now and Russia, they have brought a very separate tension that never existed before, is in explaining the aspect of the bipolar system. And with advent of China, Russia now, Iran, Brazil, South Africa, it has really weakened partly the unipolar aspect of the Americans and the aspect that these gang or alliance of countries are transcending the world into something else than the bipolar. Thank you very much for listening. Asante sana. If there's any question, I'll be more than happy also to respond.
Thank you very much indeed, Assah, for this historical background, but also analysis on the ongoing global crisis. And you've touched upon so many countries, and one actually wonders really, where do we find peace in this world? You know, when like every country is trying to fight another one. So let's start with honestly, just Joe. You are welcome.
Thank you so much. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you so much for the wonderful, very informative presentation. I learned a lot. So please correct me if I'm wrong. It seems to me like uh, wars determine allegiances. I mean, in the current world that we have, right? The wars that we have, they determine allegiances, and those allegiances determine who the countries can relate to or not relate to. The reason I'm asking this is because I'm wondering why. I don't know if you mentioned that bilateral relations are shrinking. I saw something about them shrinking. So I'm wondering
Yes.
why
Yes.
why they've been shrinking, right? Because I feel like many gaps can be filled by countries going directly to who has what they need. But it seems to me like it's politics that's clouding, that's preventing this connection. Because it seems to me like the current systems that we have are stifling the are stifling the world. And it's almost like you can have a neighbor who has a resource that you have, but maybe because that neighbor is under somebody else, now you can't deal with that neighbor. I don't know if my question came across proper. I'm just trying to understand why countries can't, why bilateral relations are shrinking, why they are not even being tried for that much. Are we that beholden to the superpowers like the powers that be? That I think that's my question. I hope it makes sense. I was touching here and there, but
Yeah, I think I understood you very well.
okay.
If you remember correctly, I talked about two aspects and don't mix them. I talked about multilateralism versus bilateralism.
Okay.
So when I talk about bilaterals, I mean the relations between country to a country.
Yes.
And then when I talk about multilateralism, I'm talking about the role of the non-state actors. These are not countries, but these are
Okay.
international institutions or organizations, which tend to have to grapple with some powers that the states have. Where are you from? If I give an example of Tanzania, for instance,
Okay.
if you look at the Tanzania foreign policy, you will find the first aspect in the Tanzania foreign policy is safeguarding territorial integrity. Now, when you have non-state actor organization like World Bank, in the World Bank, they sit somewhere in Washington, D.C., IFC, IMF, they decide something on the financial trajectories of the global financial. Sometimes they even issue the economical status of countries, which sometimes differ with national, which those provided by national by the countries themselves. And whether you like it or not, the one that will be trusted by the world will be those issued by the World Bank. So I talked in two ways. The bilateralism, the powers of nations to decide, is dwindling because of them joining forces. If you go to European Union, for instance, European Union is about many countries joining together. So they have common visa. So it means that if I'm a Tanzanian if I want to go to Germany, I can take visa from Spain, I can take visa from Portugal, from any European country.
Yeah.
So that role of Portugal, for instance, looking at nitty-gritties of the security of another country within EU, they will just issue visa without saying this guy is a threat to that country or to any alliance in the European Union. So if you go to SADC, for instance, we have a visa-free arrangement. So if we are saying visa is a restrictive or security instrument to check and balance whether somebody is fit to come to my country, and this role now is decided by SADC because we sign a protocol that brings us together and brings us, we sort of, our rights are being given as a gift to the SADC or to the European Union or to the UN, because some of the decisions are made by the UN in a group, not in individual countries or in a discussion between country to a country. But the second aspect of the same is that look at currently we have China has a forum. China meets all leaders of the Africa every year. They have a system I think they call FOCAC. FOCAC. So it's one per year. All presidents they come and discuss with China. So China is one country, but meets all the African presidents. Even Russia and even Turkey has a Africa-Turkey summit, European Union Africa summit. Even America have also started this. So you can imagine American interests are decided by meeting all African leaders, but African leaders themselves cannot decide as one country to each other, but they can decide as the whole of Africa with America. So this has also transcended this discussion to another level that countries are shrinking to decide on their own because of their involvement in these alliances that we are seeing. Of course, we had a very profitable alliance called the Non-Aligned Movement, which is now 132 countries. Even the role of NAM now is also shrinking because of these tensions. But 100% of the NAM members are aligned to the Russian Federation and China. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, thanks. And Afiz, you're welcome, Afiz.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for the presentation. So from the analysis so far, as Dr. George said earlier, that where can we find peace? In all this ongoing war, what is the world generally we are going to gain from this or benefit from this war that is ongoing? And what can be the solution to this, the war going in Iraq, Iran and Israel, USA, this, Ukraine and Russia, all this and that. So where can we find peace? What is the things you can suggest as a solution to this ongoing war so that we can be at peace in the world? Thank you.
All right. So maybe before you respond to that, Assah, if we may take also a question or comment from Dasu, so you can respond to both. Dasu?
Okay, thank you, George. How are you?
Fine, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Assah Mwambene, for your good presentation again. You have touched a lot of things, but for me, I would like to confine myself to the African context. Mwambene, Assah pointed out that most of the nations, especially in Africa, have surrendered their sovereignty to the great powers. And they also correctly pointed out about the World Bank that is imposing a lot of policies that have negative effect on African development. So I would like to ask you, Assah, do you think there is any exit strategy for Africa? Meaning that does Africa have any means to become a very active player in the global sphere without being influenced by the great powers? That's it.
Thank you very much, Dasu. Assah, you may respond, please. We don't hear you again. Your voice is lost.
Me now?
Now we hear you.
Okay. So, Dr. Afi's questions on where can we find peace and how do we move forward? What is the way forward? Well, I think if you look at the manifestation of event, you will find that the key players in terms of influencing the future security is America and Russian, with a divided attention. Russians is like one group with the Chinese. So unless you engage these all these powers, because their only mistake is that they are fighting for resources. And if the adversary, like for instance, if Russia continued to dominate in Iran, automatically that the Strait of Hormuz, automatically it means that it is crippling them, because now they have no access to Hormuz, but they also have no access to the oil from Iran. Third, Lebanon has a potential for oil. Israel wanted a safe route to transport oil from other countries beyond Iran and Lebanon. So they want that channel, and that is the only fight. So the fight is about the resources, and if the fight is about resources, unless if you have resources to give all these Americans so that they should not fight. But if you are to engage, then the best culprit to engage would be the US and Russia alliance, because if you talk about the Russia, it is an alliance. If you talk about America, it is also an alliance. And sometimes an alliance that, unfortunately, not even Americans themselves can decide, because the war between Iran and Israel was not decided by the Congress in the US, was not discussed in any decision-making instrument within the American politics. And therefore, it is a unilateral arrangement between Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, and the strongman in Bush, the President of the US. So unless you engage these players, there can't be an amicable solution, or unless you provide all these resources, you make these resources available to all of these people. The fighting will still continue. And we are, actually, this is just a start, but we should be expecting more fight, and especially to other resources beyond Europe, beyond the Persian Gulf. In the DASU, an aspect of the African context, let me tell you a story, a very interesting story. When Tanzania chaired the African Union 2008, 2009, and the years after, when Gaddafi was killed, or processes to the death of Gaddafi started with the African Union trying to say, let's go and have an early warning, see for ourselves in Libya. And the Americans said, if you go, you are going there on your own risk. So the whole leaders of Africa succumbed to the American call that you cannot do anything within your African continent. And the man who really supported the African Union development is the one that was killed without the endorsement of with the endorsement from the leadership. Jean Ping, who was then the chair of the African Union, chair of the African Commission, endorsed the killing of President Muammar Gaddafi. And so this speaks a lot of a sad story into what Africa can do, because we are seeing now that the fight in Sudan, that's a very big fight, and it's over resources, and it has nothing to do with Africa. You may talk about the issue of Darfur as an issue with an African, because these are infiltrators from neighboring countries trying to get. It's basically the war between the agriculture, farmers and pastoralists in Darfur. Essentially, the Sudan conflict is more to do with proxies of the US and the Russians. So unless we liberate Africa from, maybe we need a second liberation to liberate Africa from these proxies, we won't be doing anything.
Yeah, thank you so much. Joe, you still have a question, right? Please.
Thank you. Man, I feel like because it's like I want to I might be reiterating the question that Mr. Afiz brought up, because I just want to bring another thing to our attention, because as I feel like you painted a nice picture, right? From history up to where we are today, né? So it's easy to see how the powers changed and all that stuff. I'm concerned about this resource curse going into the future, right? This curse where like countries endowed with rare earth resources are likely to be more engulfed into conflict. Because I'm also thinking about like what happened in Venezuela and what's happening in Iran right now, right? Because essentially we're at a place where it's crazy. It's basically, it's like America is telling us that we are doing what we're doing because we want what people have and because we have the power to get it, or we think we do. So basically, I feel like it's like I'm struggling to come to terms with this reality that this is the world we live in, where because I'm also trying to see where international politics plays a significant role, or if it has accepted that this is how things operate. And I believe I'm speaking to reasonable people, to scholars, and you know what I'm saying. And can we see that it's greed that's guiding a lot of how the world runs today? And it means now the weak are literally at the mercy of everybody else who thinks they have the power. I don't know, maybe it's not a question. I think I want us to think about this. And it's like, have we accepted that this is what life is? Or are we really trying to fix things? Because the way I've been thinking about like peace coming from my just an artistic perspective, I've seen that in art you can simulate perfection, and then learn from it. You get what I'm seeing is that where we are now, we are at a place where it's difficult to even suggest a different way, because if those who can act decide no, even if it's the best way, we're not going to do it. So I'm really struggling to see what really is our way forward. I don't know if I've asked a question, but it's really, I think I'm bringing this more to us, for us, like, to think practically about peace. Really, how are we doing it? Or are we just accepting power to do whatever it wants to do, and then we're just going to play this game where we are managing, what we can?
Honestly, you must have seen the lion in the jungle when they fight. Normally, they fight over the concubine. You must have seen that picture of most of the male lion fighting over lionesses. It is, and you are an African, possibly of descent. You must also seen that when a father left some wealthy, how the family left behind, how they plunder that, or sometimes sell something that your father, kept it for years. They sell tomorrow, maybe at a very throwaway price. The issue of the current global tension is about dominance. It's about hegemony. When Ukraine tried to be member of NATO, automatically that meant that if Ukraine borders Russia, automatically Russia will be bordering Ukraine. You will be bordering NATO, and it is something that Russia never wanted to, and that's why they started with the Crimea. You remember they toppled in Ukraine. The Americans and British supported the civic societies in Ukraine to get rid of the former president of Ukraine. And immediately when they managed, Russia annexed the Crimea factor. So it is a history which is connected. Sometimes if you look at these issues in isolation, you will be losing a point. Because, so take about the issue of Ukraine and join it with the current manifestation of event in Iran. It is the same fight. And if you see Russia forming an alliance with China, it's the same over these resources. And so it's difficult to talk about peace when somebody doesn't have something to eat, or he wants to be assurance that, I have to survive for the whole of my life. And the only survival is that I have to be over someone. I have to be above everyone. And so unless you make that ambition for them, they will definitely not be demanding too much. But as it is now, they will still struggle. And
I think
we are yet to see many things.
No, I appreciate your answer. I think what I would say is to the scholars, I feel like the onus is on us to write a new reality for the rest of the world. Because the rest of the world is basically running on the rules of the jungle. And that when I look at the world and I don't see us any different from animals, I wonder what is the use of this? I think I'll end with that. Why do we have brains?
Thank you
Why
so
are we
much,
at the top of
Joe.
the food chain?
Thank you so much indeed. Pierre, you are welcome, Pierre. And we still have a few minutes left, but Pierre, you are welcome. Welcome to Mama, Global Peace.
Thank you, George. This is Pierre. I am a volunteer with Caritas International, and I am spending time trying to facilitate social forum processes across the world. And social forum is a space, an open space for dialogues, self-organized dialogues between civil society organizations. So it's a kind of way to build power from below by having civil society organizations first dialogue and acknowledge mutually, then possibly explore ways where they could cooperate, then discuss articulations and cooperations. There is no miracle recipe for building this power from below, but what is sure that you need a space where to have those dialogues aiming at developing some power from below. And so in the kind of depressing scenario and context described by Assah and others, I feel that social forum might be a place where you can gain some hope of having concerted actions decided by the power of numbers from below. So I just submit to the House that this idea of social forum is a format of a space without having leadership, but maintaining and protecting that space where dialogues can occur based on intentions and goals by each civil society organization. So I invite whoever is interested to join some webinars, why and how participate in Global WSF, which are meant to collect questions, experiences, intentions, and some answers and way forwards in terms of formats and how to do things. There is no fast track, there is no miracle recipe, but it's at least it's a space that where to nurture hope. So that was my modest submission in this interesting debate.
Thank you very much indeed, Pierre, for the invitation. I'm sure we're going to learn more, and I could see also what you put in chat. So we're going to build on that and on our conversation also before. So thank you very much. Welcome again to Global Peace. And as we are now closing, I would like to ask Assah for his kind of concluding remark for today. And I thank everybody also for being with us. And definitely, I'm looking forward to seeing you again as we meet every Wednesday. So, Assah, please. Oh, I don't hear you, Assah. Your voice again? Not yet.
Okay. Hello?
Yes, now we
Hello?
hear you.
Okay, okay, fine. So I just want to say that the last speaker, Pierre, talked about the discussions, dialogue. I think it's something that I think can also help to leverage on ways and means on how to address some of these critical issues. But unfortunately, sometimes when you talk about civil societies or CBOs, who pays them? This is another issue. Sometimes these dialogues are aligned to, the very funders or the very people with the agenda to over resources. And so it's very unfortunate that we might be discussing this issue as people who have interest in resolving conflicts. But if you look at all the means of resolving conflicts, you'll find out that this aspect that we are touching, the discussion that we are discussing about, is very complicated in the sense that it has no ownership. You wouldn't say Americans are owning this 100% because it is, otherwise if they knew about this strategy, the Strait of Hormuz wouldn't be a problem to them. If you say it is China or Russia, they have hand in terms of stabilizing or supporting Iran. So they have provided a lot of tension and a lot of difficulties for Americans to, conquer Iran. But still, in themselves, they are not the owners of this process. So the situation is that the global citizens like us, the more we engage our government, and the more we, as the PRM noted, the engagement among ourselves as a global citizens can help to lessen this challenge in terms of addressing the needs that we need as global citizens. The global citizens themselves are also divided. So you have those who think in the line of Russian or the Russian alliance. You have those who think in the Western aspect, but you have those who speak as the Ubuntu or the Pan-African perspectives, and but yet have no power to decide. I wish these people who can decide is global people, and it is us. So unless each of us takes a step in every country to engage our government to change the attitude and to change the current manifestation events, we will be in the elusive end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Assah. And I also definitely agree with you and, of course, also Pierre about developing peace from below. That's what in Mama we are trying to do. And together, I'm sure, at least we are speaking the same language, the language of peace. And I'm also optimistic that we will get there. So thank you very much indeed, Assah, once again for your time. I thank everybody also on this call. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you for keeping Mama alive. I wish you all the best. See you next week. Bye-bye for now.